The system we live in is incredibly unfair because it forces every one of us to become part-time investors. Not because every one of us is super greedy, but simply because our cash devalues over time. We have to escape that devaluation. Now, why does cash devalue? It's because the monetary base expands. How does it expand? Through several ways. The main way is people taking loans. So when you buy a house, you get a mortgage, you borrow money from the bank. The bank doesn't have that money. The money is simply created out of thin air. That's what's meant with fractional reserve banking. Now, there's different measures to figure out how much money is actually floating. And looking at the details of those individual measures might be fruitful. What we've got over here is USM0. What we've got over here is USM1. And what we've got over here is USM2. So M0 is simply your paper money, the coins and bills that you are hoarding under the mattress. M1 adds deposits to this, so your current account at the bank. M2 adds savings deposits, so that's now money that might be locked up for a few months. It might be more advanced instruments like money market shares, but that's how this is split up. Now, there is a slight difference between those charts. So let's have a look. At the bottom, we've got M0, in the middle, M1, and at the top, M2. All of those measures rise over time. That's not necessarily a surprise because, again, the monetary base expands, but there are interesting events. For example, this one over here in 2008, where the circulating currency doubled in a very short period of time. Or have a look at this, 2020, when the checking accounts all went bonkers. At the top, again, we've got the sum. Now let's have a look at the relationship between those numbers. 5 trillion in hard currency, another 15 trillion roughly for the checking accounts, because again, M1 includes M0. And then a little bit of a delta to also include the money market shares and the time deposits. So in reality, the chart shouldn't look like this. It should rather look like this. Again, currencies is M0, adding the checking accounts is M1, and adding the fixed deposits is M2. Now, the relationship between those numbers fluctuates quite a bit over time. This is simply just the current state. Let's try to figure out what happened during those two events. So first, October of 2008. That's over here. What we are looking at in this chart is the S&P 500 divided by USM2. So stocks can keep up with the monetary debasement, but they're not making much more than that. So what we see here as the first crisis, this was the dot-com bubble. What we see here at the second crash, that's the global financial crisis. So the crisis of mortgage-backed securities, etc. So when the media started covering how banks will likely implode and how there are bank runs, etc., that's when people withdrew their cash. When the cash basis increased a lot, it more than doubled, while the overall money supply didn't really grow. What happened over here in 2020? Again, let's have a look at the S&P 500 relative to money supply. Check out this little crash over here. That was, of course, COVID. So the government created a lot of new money that they simply sent to all the checking accounts. Here's the problem with crypto YouTube. People promoting becoming degen or buying 100x coins. That's what gives clicks, but that's not what's going to bring you forward. I refuse to take money from centralized exchanges. I refuse to take money from crypto projects. I refuse to pump and dump a coin and filling up my pockets in the background. I don't do any of this. Instead, I share my knowledge in the form of tutorials in the premium membership. So that's content that won't do well on YouTube, but that builds up skill over time. You can also directly contact me over there. You can directly pick my brain. Feel free to check it out. TheBitcoinStrategy.com is the link. Now let's have a look at the relationship of those different measures over time. This is USM0 relative to USM1. So how much hard cash is there relative to hard cash plus checking accounts? And again, this went up massively during the global financial crisis when people feared the banks. It went down massively when the government transferred those COVID handouts. It's also interesting to look at the 100 line. So this is when net there was no money whatsoever. In total, the checking accounts were overdrafted. People still had cash, but they didn't have anything in their checking accounts. The COVID relief packages then gave a massive relief to all of that. Here is US M1 relative to M2. And again, the checking accounts went bonkers during COVID before they tended to trend down over time. What I find interesting here is that those COVID handouts seem to have a lasting effect, as in the balance in aggregate is still at a similar level. People didn't spend all of their COVID money. It might be concentrated in a few more rich bank accounts, but in aggregate, the handouts really changed something fundamentally. And so have a look at this chart. Again, the color coding is the same as here. Cash is in blue, cash plus checking accounts is in red. And so this time over here is when the checking accounts had been in aggregate in the negatives. And green is the total money supply. We see those two very nice step functions. And so in theory, the market should be doing its thing, right? In theory, the monetary base should expanding because of more loans being given out. But in practice, what we see is that massive significant events are government intervention. The reason why the S&P 500 was able to recover from the global financial crisis and from the COVID crash is simply because more money was given out. The government and the US Federal Reserve in the end is the rescuer of last resort. If times are tough, then money devalues even more. And that makes the game even more unfair because it puts even more stress on people to become smart about their investing. There are very few investments that can actually beat monetary expansion. The S&P 500 can barely make it. After cost and tax, it's another question if it actually can. Bitcoin in the past definitely has beaten monetary expansion. I do also expect this to continue in the future. Tech stocks also tend to outperform monetary expansion. If you own property with very low financing costs, so let's say you finance it with 2 or 3%, then you can also beat monetary expansion because then your debt devalues over time. US M2 goes up by roughly 6.8% per annum. So I know on this channel I talk a lot about various cryptocurrencies, I talk a lot about meme coins, etc. But the end goal is not necessarily to make a 100x on a small amount of money. The end goal is to simply protect ourselves against this massive inflation of money. Over time, we save up more and more wealth relative to our income, and so we can't risk everything on just a moonshot. We have to simply become smart about not getting eroded away by the system. If you got something out of this video, feel free to give this a like, feel free to also share. And of course, if it's your first time here, feel free to hit subscribe as well. I publish videos regularly. If you've got Telegram, you're more than welcome to join us. The link is down below. It's 100% free. Looking very much forward to chatting with you.